A little while ago on Fact Hunt, I did an episode on games that were cancelled for stupid reasons. However, what happens when a publisher wants to cancel a game after it's been released? Sounds incredibly stupid, but it does happen. So this episode we dedicate to those pulled ports, those displaced discs, but unfortunately not those games that should have been recalled because we're duped by lies. All lies! You liar! You lousy, stinking liar! But, hello you, I'm Guru Larry and I'll welcome you to Fact Hunt. 5 games recalled for shocking reasons. Okay, I'll get my obligatory European game no one's ever heard of out the way first. Skweek, which some of you may remember on the Game Gear as Slider, was a puzzle game where you play as a yellow dust bunny who has to traverse all the tiles on a map without getting hit by enemies. For such a simple concept, it's surprisingly fun. However, all was not well with the Amstrad port of the game, as whenever you completed a level, Skweek would tell the player to go fuck their mother. Yes, really. So, shocked by this, the publisher, US Gold, were forced to recall all copies off the market. How did this happen? Pretty simple really. US Gold released the wrong version of the game. The version they published was a much earlier build of the game, but for whatever reason, the programmers got bored one night and thought it would be funny to make the main character spew off more profanities than the late noughties AVGN ripoff of Tourette's syndrome, and send that off to the publisher. No, I've got absolutely no idea why either. This is probably the most forgotten recall on this list. To the point the only reason it's even remembered is because I have vague memories of reading about it in a magazine as a child, and Amstrad forums questioning my YouTube comments about its validation. Man, I love inserting myself into these videos. Doesn't make me look egotistical whatsoever, does it? Who said yes? While this isn't really a shocking reason per se, it's definitely the funniest story on our list. Now, despite it never appearing on those top 10 lists, the Commodore 64 GS was actually the worst selling console in history. Seriously. So much so, only a handful of publishers even bothered releasing games for it, even though they could be played on a standard Commodore 64 still. But the most prolific of them was once again our old Mancunian chums at Ocean. Now, despite Virgin owning the rights to the home computer ports of Double Dragon, which they themselves had already released a Commodore 64 version of, which was a bit crap, admittedly, like they had replaced Billy and Jimmy with a black man in dungarees for some reason. But for whatever reason, Ocean thought it would be a great idea to make another version for a console nobody wanted. Except, it wasn't a good idea. The game was terrible. Worse than Virgin's attempt, in fact. Half of the content is missing, to the point the final boss fight with Willy is instead replaced with 2 decapitated heads making out. So embarrassed by this shoddy port, someone at Ocean pulled the game from the market. Pulling a game because it's crap isn't a totally unheard of thing, but what happened next is. This action seems to have devolved from a complete lack of communication, as one of the higher-ups at Ocean was outraged they pulled the carts off the market, as, unlike tapes or disc, you can't reburn them. Just bury them in a landfill for 30 years until someone makes a self-absorbed documentary that focuses on his fat mate who drives a DeLorean than the actual people involved. Where was I? Oh yes. So not wanting to destroy their own inventory, in a bout of unrivalled hilarity, Ocean re-released the exact same recalled stock back onto the market, but this time include a new instruction manual apologising for how shit the game was. You couldn't make it up. The strangest thing is, was it worth the effort? As we're not actually talking about thousands of copies being re-released, Ocean made barely over 100 of them. So the C64 GS copy of Double Dragon goes for insane prices now on eBay. But for the sheer amount of times Ocean has appeared on Fact Hunt, you're probably fully aware of how completely bonkers they were. very rare to hear of an arcade machine be recalled, but that's exactly what happened with Taito's 1990 puncher Sonic Blast Man, which in today's world sounds like a YouTube channel that hates on Sega mascots. Now, the object of Sonic Blast Man is simple. Just hit the damn thing as hard as you possibly can. That's it. Unfortunately, Taito focused on making the machine as robust as possible, instead of, well, not violating health and safety laws, as the padding used on the initial patch was so thin, people were essentially smashing their knuckles on a giant metal pole. So either out of human decency, or the potential fear of receiving hundreds of medical bills for broken hands once the machine was released in the US, Taito pulled all machines off the market and replaced the pole's padding with a much nicer giant pillow instead. But what's a few broken bones in your hands compared to gaining the immortality of looking like an edgelord in front of a bunch of truants and 4-year-olds running around pressing buttons at your local arcade? It's totally worth it. Quite possibly the most awkwardly difficult game ever to talk about in this day and age. The Guy game was one of those last bastions of the 90s lads night out phase that tried to dupe a bunch of horny jocks into buying a particularly rubbish You Don't Know Jack ripoff with the lure of, it's got loads of boobs in it. As that's essentially what it is. The story behind the game is the developer, Top Heavy Studios, obviously a proxy, took a camcorder to the 2003 South Padre Island spring break pretending to be a TV show, then asked random, possibly drunk girls stupid questions. And if they got them wrong, they had to take their tops off. Then took that footage home to try and work a game around it. Unfortunately, the developer was so excited about this fantastic concept, they never bothered to actually check the ages of the girls they filmed. So, once the game hit retail, one of the girls filmed took the publisher to court for not only being misled to what the footage was intended for, a TV show rather than a video game, but also at the time of recording, she was only 17 at the time, which by US law is not only underage, but also legally considered to be child pornography. So the Guy game was recalled as, under US law, it's legally considered to be child porn. Inevitably, copies were desperately recalled. Restraining orders were put on Microsoft and Sony, and Top Heavy Studios went out of business. But not before releasing a DVD version of the game through their website. So, the Guy game, by US law, is quite possibly the only video game in history that's illegal to not only sell, but also own. Oh, and by the way, IGN reviewed it and gave it 7.7 out of 10, describing it as solid, simple and fun. And then informing us that the game has 1,000 alternate questions for sloppy seconds. There are no words.
Since you can't get that flash meter going, looks like these are the only titties you're gonna see.
Long before Bundy were duping us into buying DLC disguised as full games, heck, long before they were making Microsoft mascots originally intended as PS2 games, Bundy were renowned as a Mac and PC game developer, and none of their titles was more prolific than their real-time strategy series, Myth. Well, possibly Marathon. Oh, and Oni, of course, which I did the artwork for. Sorry, inserting myself again. Anyhow, so when Myth 2 Soulblighter was announced, 90s PC gamers, tired of their Quakes and their Duke Nukems, pre-ordered it in their dozens. Unfortunately, they were in for a nasty surprise, and I don't mean making Peter Dinklage provide monotonic voice acting for the game. The initial release of Myth 2 had a small bug in it that may have given your computer one or two issues. Sorry, I meant it would wipe your entire hard drive. You see, when it came to creating an uninstalled program for the game, Bundy decided to hire a moron of Wizard from the Moon proportions to do the job, as instead of just deleting the programmer got lazy and made it delete the parent folder instead. Now that's damaging enough if you kept all your games in one folder, or with your source of images you've collected off the internet. But if you were stupid enough to store games on the root folder of your PC, it would delete your entire hard drive. This major issue was only discovered when one of the translators for the Asian release of the game managed to do just that. But by that time, the English version had already been shipped. So Bundy went on a desperate crusade to recall every single copy, though some did actually manage to make it to retail. But feel sorry for the poor git who was forced to open every single copy, destroy the disc, and then replace it with a patched version. Though hopefully it was the same fool who created the bug and his infinite stupidity.